No, I used the bread. Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I think I did. Just looking at it's the last time you were on the show was the 28th of October 2019
Wow.
when you were just
It,
ramping up your launch for the first pods up north.
yeah. And then the thing is, in many ways, that 2020 feels like a complete write-off because it almost feels like it didn't happen because what actually happened in
Nothing.
2020?
Nothing. Only bad things
Well,
happened,
you say
really.
that. Yeah. I
Everything was
mean,
cancelled,
I
pretty
think I
much.
managed to do
It
some
was
things
like
with the time.
if it was like on a calendar in a year of calendars, it would just have a red cross through it. 2020. There's just no. Did anything good come from it?
Yeah.
Uh,
Um.
what good happened in 2020?
I mean, it's
That
gone.
silence says it all, really. I mean, the first thing of 2021, obviously Trump out, but then now Glastonbury cancelled. So
Hmm.
that is
One good thing, which I've just been inspired by from watching the video. So the way that this is coming through now, we've got the four little windows, and I'm in the bottom corner,
yeah.
and I'm assuming it's because of the software and the delay, but there's about a 1 second, 1.5, 2 second delay on the video.
Right.
And so that has reminded me of the one good thing of 2020, which was the Christopher Nolan film Tenet, which
I've not seen
is
it.
all about time and things.
Ah, right.
Very good, very good, and also like to the point where not only is it very good, but you instantly go, "I'm going to watch that again," just to try and figure out what was happening and going, "Is that the?" Oh yeah, but I think I've watched it 2.5 times now, and I could probably watch it again. So
cool. So yeah, we're talking 15 months ago since you were last on the show. So obviously 2020 you had to do Pods Up North virtually. How did it go?
It went really well. Yeah. So the thing with that was we were hoping that we would still be able to do the event as normal, and we had it slated for November again. Obviously, the whole COVID situation really started to escalate in end of February, beginning of March, at which time I was in America. So I'd actually gone out. I was speaking at Podfest, and while I was there, I was having conversations and meeting with people about being involved and possible speakers and sponsors for Pods Up 2020. And we'd already had a meeting with Spotify who wanted to be involved again. Very, very nicely, they did say to us that of all the events that they got involved with last year, that was the most benefit that they'd had in terms of the right people in the right space at the right time. So it was a great, the whole feedback from the whole event was great. And so we were full steam ahead to do it. I flew out to America for 10 days. We just had this meeting with Spotify, and then the plan was we'd come back and sign all the contracts and things like that. And literally flew back in on the 10th of March. And that was just when things were starting to get a little bit like something serious is happening. And I actually came back from America with a dry cough, which was probably down to the air conditioning and the flight. But
uncommon.
Just to be on the safe side, just to be on the safe side, did the self-isolation thing for the week as they were advising. As it got towards the end of that week, they said, actually, you should self-isolate for 2 weeks. So, okay, did it for 2 weeks. And as we got to the end of that second week, everything got locked down. So I was like, ah. So I kind of felt like lucky in two ways. One, I'd managed to get a holiday in just before anybody else.
Yeah.
And two, I also had 2 weeks of lockdown practice before anybody else. So I was really good at it when it started.
Practice.
So obviously that put things into a spin. There was an event I was supposed to be going to up in Newcastle, Atomicon, run by Andrew and Pete. That was taking place in May. We watched very closely how they dealt with that. They initially started to make it across two, a live event and an online event. So we watched what they did, and in the end, they had to go fully virtual, and they did it really well. It was a really great event. Captured the experience brilliantly. They were using all these different technologies to make it work. But afterwards, it felt really. It was great while you were at the event, but afterwards, it was like, oh, because suddenly you're just back in your spare room on your own, and usually at that point at an event like that, a conference, that's when you would go for a drink or go for a bite to eat, or just sit in the reception of the hotel and I'll talk till 4 a.m, those kinds of things. And that's when the real magic happens at these events, when people come together. That's the real secret of networking. It's not the formalized stuff, it's the informal stuff. It's when you're getting into the elevator, when you're passing somebody on the stairs, it's those kind of conversations that come up, and that was missing. So I spent most of the summer doing lots of different virtual conferences and events. I even did an artificial intelligence one that I got invited to, which is not my field at all, but just to see how different people did things. I was on one with Spotify, I was on one with Radio Days Europe, all these different companies doing things. And we looked at it and we were thinking, it's just not going to be the same. But we also had this wonderful lead time, because we weren't slated until November. Everybody else who had events in the spring and the summer were really struggling. So we thought we'll make a call in the summer and see how it goes. So in the summer, we're about to go, all right, let's start going for this around about September. And that was when cases started picking up and they started bringing in regional lockdowns as well. And actually, like a lot of people, where I'm in Manchester, we've really only been out of lockdown for about 6 weeks. So, and even then, people were very cautious about going out. So we took the decision to cancel it. Thankfully, we hadn't put many things into place. But part of the issue that we had as well was some of the businesses that we used, because the whole idea behind Pods Up North was to have an event that reflected podcasting outside of the big bubbles of the metropolis of London. And we also, with that, wanted to work, if we could, where possible, not only with podcasters that were outside of London, but service providers. So that could be the people that did our coffee was a local company. Our sound AV technologist came over from Yorkshire. All those different things that we had were local, and even where we could, the sponsors. But as it came closer to the time, we suddenly realized that some of these businesses may not exist by this point because of furlough, because of the different things that they were facing. So we just thought, we'll put it on hold, we'll come back, we'll postpone it by 6 months, we'll come back in Easter 2021. Seemed reasonable, gives time for things to work out, that optimistic way. And then what happened, obviously we realized that that might not happen. And also we thought we should really do something, just a place marker, something to hold the space, because, otherwise, I think it's like anything, the longer you put off than the next one, the less likely it is to come back. So we thought it's important that we do something. So whereas for the first event, we basically decided to do it 3 months before the event. For this one, 5 weeks before the event, we managed in a brief period of non-lockdown to all get together and have a drink. And at that point decided what we would do and how we would do it. And then it went from being, let's just do a quick masterclass online, an hour to 2 hours, to very quickly exploding to all these different things. And we had 20 speakers in just over 2 hours. And yeah, it was actually almost as much work as putting on the real thing the year before.
Different kind of work, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing we did with it was we decided that because it had been a difficult time and this wasn't going to be the full event that we'd like to give, we would do it almost as a loss leader. So we do it as something that would keep people interested and bring people forward, so that when we have the real event, people will come to that. And so with that in mind, and because we were aware it's not the same experience as a full event, we did it as a pay as you feel. So the idea being that, as a lot of people have, if you've been struggling through lockdown, we don't want you to miss out because of that. So if you can afford it, if things have been good, you can afford 20 quid, 30 quid, 40 quid, brilliant. If you can only afford £1, brilliant, come along, be part of it. And yeah, we put that out and it worked really well. And we did have some people take advantage of that, you may say. Like one person paid a penny, but then did write us a lovely email afterwards. No minimum? Yeah, so we said anywhere between, we just said, look, we're not going to dictate what it is, but if people asked us, we said, look, £10, £20 would be great, but whatever you can afford, because so many people in so many different situations, and also we don't know how long the situation is going to run on. Like you might be all right this month, but next month, who knows? So and people varied, and we did have some people paid really generous amounts to be part of it. And we also had a sponsor come in, Agora Pulse, who helped schedule your social media, which really helped put the whole thing together. And it was brilliant. And just to give a scale of how good it was, we had a former Google employee approached us afterwards and said that was the best online event I've ever been to.
Wow.
which is definitely going on the posters next year. We might have to bit of artistic license.
Yeah.
Really
cool.
But because you probably wouldn't know his name, we'll maybe sort of play around with it and say Steve Jobs said.
Yeah. So was there an average what some people paid?
Yeah, so it averaged out about £10 what people paid. So that was enough for us to sort of cover the cost of the event. We did it on Zoom webinars, and the event is available live. Well, actually, I think it worked at £8.74. And as guided by that, if you missed the event, you can now catch it up online. It's available to download for $7.99, and that will be there for as long as you want. And we'll put the links in the show notes or here or wherever. But yeah, it's really valuable. And so the whole idea behind it was, in the same way that we'd done our first event last year and this was our second event, we looked from the point of view of like, if you just started your podcast last year, where would you be now? And actually that stage is somewhere a lot of people are at. You know, whether you started your podcast last month or 3 years ago or last year, you're always in this sort of bit where you go, well, I've got it started, I've got into the routine, I'm doing it, I'm enjoying it, but, and then there's always a but. And then that but can be, I'm not making...
How do I reach more people? How do I promote, how do I market my podcast?
It's not doing what I want it to do. You know, it's not giving me the fame, the influencer reputation that I wanted. It's not all these different, and it's like, yeah, it's slightly different for a lot of people. And a lot of it does come down to money. People come down to money, and then they go, well, it's not money, it's actually figures. But then when you go down into it, it's, I think the figures is a strange one, because it's like one of those things, like a bit like your bank account. You're never going to tell me that you've got too much money in your bank account. So you're always going to want more listeners. Yeah. So if I said to you, I'm gonna give you an extra 500 listeners, you go, great, that's great. I really appreciate that. But then if somebody else says after that, I'll give you an extra 5,000 listeners, you're going to go, yeah, great. So I think that's very, very appealing, and I think it's great, and I encourage people to go and grow their audience and have that. But I would just have you think about it before you go down that route as well, because if you suddenly just go and chase the audience and chase the figure, and it's similarly for you with your background as a musician as well, you can do your own expression, your own passion, your own niche in your own genre, and create that and build that out. Or if you want regular work that pays money, just learn a bunch of Oasis covers and play weddings.
Yeah, that's easier.
It is easier, but then which feeds your soul? And you might love Oasis, and you might love those songs and love being at weddings, in which case it's perfect for you. But for you, I mean, I'd love to see, I'd love to have seen your band do a wedding.
For the right price, it could have been done.
Yeah, well,
do metal versions of the classic wedding songs. Somebody told me. But yeah. What are the, like, when you did the first one, you actually had people giving sessions. What was the main focus of the sessions? Is it aimed at more people who are just sort of beginning podcasts, would you say?
So the first one was just a case for having an event and celebrating, and you can read all about it at podsupnorth.com and see some little sizzle reels of it. And there's some of the sessions we did online and are available on YouTube as well to watch. I think we streamed a couple of them, and you can catch them on YouTube. So you just look for Pods Up North and you'll find them there. In terms of what we did this year, the whole idea was Pods Up, Level Up. The way the event came together, was we had 2 panel sessions, and one was based around this idea of, again tying into your musician background, the difficult second album. And
Right.
part of our panel we had on there was Clint Boone, the keyboard player with the Inspiral Carpets, who is a musician who has done a second album and is also a podcaster and makes a series of podcasts, and is now working in Discord as well and building up his own community through that. So we had that panel, which was kind of like looking at that second difficult album. And then we had a second panel, and then we had a couple of keynote sessions. So one was on how to build up your voice and make the most of your voice with Nick Redman, who's an amazing voiceover artist. Then we had a keynote from Janet Murray, which was brilliant, and I loved it because the opening line was basically, "I don't like podcasts," and to have that as a as the keynote for a podcast event. But it was more about, again, breaking out of that bubble and being, the thing is, actually, it doesn't matter that it's not about being a podcaster or having a podcast or how many listeners you get. I think that was the second line she says, "I don't care how many listeners I get," which, again, because we talked about improving your listeners.
Yeah.
Her whole point on that came down to, what I care about is my content.
Yeah.
And that's what our focus
that should
is
be
on.
Everyone's main focus when they start. Forget about all the other stuff comes later. You can't have that other stuff without good content.
Yeah. But and I think the perfect example of that is somebody I'm working with at the minute. Their kids have started making a podcast, and they're very young, and the older boy's 12, maybe 13, and they made the first episode, and he doesn't want to make another one now until he gets a sponsor, and he doesn't understand why he's not an influencer yet, and it's quite a difficult conversation to have. So I think the thing is, there's lots of people ask these questions, and I think you have to be able to have that conversation and answer these questions for them and get them engaged and look at ways that can happen. But as you say, and as Janet said in the keynote, and if you're interested, please go and check it out. It helps us put on more events like this. She said, what's important is the content. What's important is what I'm putting out. And then once you've got that, you can then market it, and then you can then send it out, and then you can then share it. And that's where your focus goes and your energy goes. And it is a tricky thing to balance, because effectively what's happened in, like, one of the great things about podcasts is there are no gatekeepers, in that we can have a show like this. We can do it from our bedroom, and all that needs for this show to happen is for you to want to do it and me to agree to come on. And that's it. Whereas if you wanted to do it in a traditional way, with a TV network, with a radio network, those kinds of things, you have to pitch, you have to raise the funding, you have to hire people, you have to go through the whole process, you have to have a production slate, you then do you then have a pilot, they'll say, "We love the idea, we love the concept, but actually we don't want Ant on the show. Can you bring this other guest in and talk about this?
Sure you talk about this,
and then
could you not talk about this?"
Yeah. And then they'll say to you, "How do you feel about taking a more advisory role, because we want Jonathan Ross to host it instead?" And
we like your idea,
and then you're in a
do it.
yeah, and just you kind of far away from it as possible. So that's the kind of thing that happens in the traditional media. Here, what happens is we can just go and do it. However, what we lose in that is all the things that traditional media has, in that they have a whole department of people to sell it. They have a whole department of people that are trained experts in making it sound really good and look really good. The whole marketing side of things, the connections to bring all these different aspects in. Exactly. And so what happens is, when you come into doing it this way, in this independent way, is you have to do all of that. And what tends to happen is trying to find the balance, because I don't know about you, but I certainly find that I'll put my heart and soul into the content. And once I reach that point of finishing the show and uploading it, I was once asked on a show what my definition of success was, and I'd never really thought about it. And I took a moment and went, hit and upload, because sometimes you put so much into and honestly, but I think for a lot of people that's a real barrier as well. But getting to that point where you can go, it's good enough to put out there. However, that's kind of when the real work starts, because just putting it out there does not guarantee an audience. Kevin Costner lied. You know,
Yeah.
if you build it, they will not come.
But it's
Yeah,
also
some people will find it.
You've got to start somewhere. You've got to put something out to have a frame of reference to improve upon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing with that is if you can do that, whether it's one show or 10 shows or once a month or once a year, very quickly, you know, you'll have a back catalogue of things.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you'd made one podcast last year, that's one podcast that you made when everybody else was watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And going and queuing at Aldi. You know, that's, you know, it's so like, you've actually done something.
It's like athletes who stay out and train more. Everyone else has gone home. You're still training. They're eating calories. You're burning calories. It's like it's a mentality thing, I think.
I've met a few athletes in different genres and heard the same story. So I wonder if this is something that they all do actually, despite it. And they talk about how their training regime starts on Christmas Day. Because they think that their mindset is their opponent will take the day off, will take Christmas Day off.
That's Cristiano Ronaldo, so, that is.
Yeah, and so if you do, I've heard it with as a judo champion. It was 1997. Wayne Laken. I've trained with him once, and amazingly skilled judo player. And he told me the same story. And he was like, 6 a.m. Christmas morning, I was out running. You know, getting the running and doing my reps, because I figured if I did this, I'd have 1 day extra training over my opponent. And then when you get to that level, that 1 day makes all the difference. And you're right, you know, Ronaldo's exactly the same sort of mentality.
36, isn't he? And he's just equaled or broken the all-time goal-scoring record.
Yeah, there's an interesting, so many stories about him as well. And it's funny because when you look from a social point of view, there's this thing between Ronaldo and Messi, and I would say people tend to be more in love with Messi than they are with Ronaldo. Ronaldo's quite a divisive character.
Yeah, he comes across a bit more egotistical and loves himself.
And the thing, but when you look at the two of them, everyone will say, well, Messi's the more naturally gifted player. He's the more naturally gifted, But then when you think about what that means is Ronaldo's gone and worked really hard and really dedicated his life and continues to work hard to get to that stage. And yet that seems to generate a lot of backlash for him. And I've been guilty of it as well. I've not liked him for a long time.
But he can walk the walk. He can back up everything he says.
Absolutely.
So I have no complaints in that.
I think what the thing is, people don't see the detail that it goes to, and obviously he's got this amazing lifestyle which people are jealous and envious of, and I appreciate that and understand that, but he's not spending the whole time on a yacht and then just playing football twice a week. When you look into what he's done, so whenever they released a new football, he would be the first person to, like, before it was officially released into the league, he would come down to the manufacturers and take a bag of balls and spend a couple of days kicking those balls to learn how to use them better, to learn how to do different shots with them, to see how differently these balls moved. So that's the kind of thing. I'm not sure how many other people did that.
But going back to podcasters, you've just got to. It takes work, it takes time, and I think a lot of people have this perception that it's easier than it actually is, or it doesn't require as much work, which is maybe why people have gravitated towards it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is an effort. There's an element of that, and we've seen a massive explosion in podcasting, which actually I think is a good thing. I think the more people that at least try and make a podcast, it shows that more people are aware of podcasting. I think it's I think there's also, we're in a world, and I've possibly said this to you before, but the best podcasts haven't been made yet. The best podcasts are going to be made by this generation of people, because we're now at the stage where podcasting is 16 years old, 17 years old. And so that's a whole generation of people with the skills, with the talent, with the voice, with the opinion that can go and make a podcast and have never known a world without podcasting.
Yeah, they have that idea that no one's heard of that's still possible.
Exactly.
It's such a
plus as
industry.
well, they've not been shaped by a previous industry. So your experiences in the music industry will shape you, even though I've pushed against them the fact that I had a radio background will always shape me. And so I think we're in this exciting time now where it's really going to come into its own. And I mean, at the end of the day, as much as I love and as much as I shout about podcasting all the time, it's just another medium. It's just a way of delivering something. That's all that it is. So you can get, there are things that make it unique and different and brilliant, but it's just a way of sharing a message. If I tell you a story, you may consume that as a podcast, but somebody else may consume that by reading a blog or reading my book or reading an article I've written in a magazine or watching a YouTube video that I made or something on TikTok or Snapchat, all these different ways of doing things. And of course, there's the new app that everybody's really excited about on Apple now. Is it Chatbox? I can't remember what it's called.
Something.
I know. I've just
rooms. No.
Yeah. We're really showing our age now.
Clubhouse.
But Clubhouse, that's it. Yeah. So Clubhouse is
but I keep hearing about it.
Yeah. So Clubhouse is this thing that everyone's trying to get into at the minute because it's the exciting way, and it's kind of like Zoom but purely audio. There's no video on it. It's only on iPhone at the minute. They're in beta testing, so it's really difficult to get hold of it. They've done a great job with the marketing on that because now it's like Willy Wonka's golden ticket. If you've got an invite to this, and you're right, but people don't know what it is, but they want it, and that's brilliant. They've done some good work on that.
Yeah, they've they've sort of shown off what it is, but not really. So people are intrigued by it, and then the more people talk about it,
yeah, I mean, that's it. I saw an email from somebody in a group of mine offering an invite, and straight away I was like, yeah. I don't even have an iPhone at the minute. I'm like, but still, yeah. I'm like, it'll work on my iPad. Send it over.
I think I only heard about it because I listened to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, and they were talking about how could podcasters use it. Yeah,
the interesting thing about that is it's all live and not recorded at the moment.
I see. Right.
Yeah. So the idea is more like a conversation. So it just disappears.
Yeah.
So, and I think that might appeal to some people as well, because one of the big issues that comes up time and time again, people not liking the sound of their own voice, and they're always worried, what if I've said something and somebody hears it and they disagree with my opinion?
Yeah.
Well, you can manage that, in that room. There's a similar, that reminds me of a conversation I saw with Frankie Boyle, where he had told a joke, and a journalist called him the next day and said, I'm going to tell that joke to the family of the person you told it about. And Frankie Boyle says, well, if you do that, that's your joke, then it's not my joke. Because I told that joke in that room with those people, and I made that call and judged it in there. And now if you, through hearsay, are now going to go on and tell that to somebody else, you are telling that joke. I may have created the joke.
Yeah, that person's chosen to tell them, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly. So there's I can see the appeal of anonymity almost of maybe having a Clubhouse. And maybe this is where everybody that was using Parler and following Donald Trump will move is to Clubhouse, because they can
it's the only place left for him.
Move. But then
he'll just talk and no one will listen.
You know what? I would not be surprised when you look around, and this will be a really interesting test of the medium, is I reckon that we will have a Donald Trump podcast this year.
I was just thinking that yesterday, when I thought when he left, I thought, well, he's been deplatformed. All he can really do, he can't go on YouTube. He could do a podcast, easy. Yeah.
And you look at the audiences that somebody like Joe Rogan has.
Yeah.
And he will start off by doing the tour, and Joe Rogan would interview him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He would have a massive audience, because 50% of people who want to hear what he has to say, and 50% of people who can't stand it but still want to know what he has to say.
Yeah, and that's and I think the thing is I saw more people that are anti-Trump be upset that his Twitter had gone because it was the source of all their comedy and all their ranting and kind of going, what an idiot. And that once his Twitter handle had gone, he was like, what am I going to talk about now?
Well, you talk about you like wrestling, and a lot of people tune in for people who they hate as much as the people that they love.
Yeah.
Because they want to hurl abuse at people that they can't stand.
Yeah, but I think the thing is with wrestling is there's a lot of parallels with pantomime.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
If you've never been to a wrestling game, you've certainly been to a pantomime in the UK, and it's a really interesting experience going to a panto as an adult, especially if you get really involved and joined in. Because
I was going to say, especially if you get really drunk.
Well, I'm not saying I haven't, but there is something very cathartic in being in an environment where you are allowed to effectively, not just allowed, but encouraged to hurl abuse against another person, and that person encourages it and enjoys it. So when the bad guy comes on, you boo, you hiss, and the more that you do, the more opportunity they have to have a comeback, so they can perform better and they enjoy it. And it makes more of a show.
Job. That's your job. If you're getting more booze,
exactly,
louder, you're doing well. You're doing your job. But it has to take a certain person who can, who would actually want to do that and enjoy being booed. It's a certain. Not everyone would be like, I can't do that.
and that's pretty much what happens in wrestling as well. And this is the new world that I've discovered, that I found myself in.
Oh yeah. So what's the story then?
So the story of this goes. So it's a complete lockdown project called Wrestling with a Champ, which is a podcast which we just started season 2 of, and the story behind it is, the setup is basically Damien St. John, who is a friend of mine and really experienced sort of DJ and writer, sits down and interviews the 35-time champion, PWF champion, that's the Pub Wrestling Federation, the Ginger Ninja. So it's kind of in the vein of that Peter Crouch podcast and any of those podcasts that you hear with former sports stars sitting talking about their career, except in this instance, the glory days aren't what other people in this day class has been glorious or even days. So the whole project came about from Damien's stag do before he got married, so about 3 years ago. And Damien is a crazy wrestling fan. And so we did the usual thing, as you would. We took him to Bognor Regis and dressed him up as the Ultimate Warrior and arranged to spend the Saturday night watching one of these church hall wrestling matches, front row seats, cardboard signs, the whole shebang. And while we were sorting it out, we chatted to the organizers, and they arranged for us to come along in the afternoon as well. So while they were getting everything set up for the evening's entertainment, we had a 4-hour session training with the wrestlers, learning how to do rope bounces, floor slams, throws, all sorts of things. And it was brilliant. And at the end of the day, they gave us the opportunity to put what we'd learned into action. And so they put Damien in the middle of the ring, and we had some kind of Royal Rumble. We all came in one at a time and attacked him, and he would use one of the moves that he learned, and we would sell it. And one of the guys on the stag do is a videographer, and so we got this amazing video out of it from the end. And I was the last one to go into the ring with him. So there was 2 of us that had done a little bit of training before, so we went last, and I kind of went full. I really got into it, ripped my shirt off. Pulled the big mean face, kind of looked like the ender level baddie. I think with the bald head and the beard as well, I looked a little bit like what was the TIE fighter called in Street Fighter?
Sagat? No, not Sagat.
Sagat, yeah.
Is it him?
Yeah, I don't think he had a beard, but I was kind of like, I was a combination between Sagat and the Russian wrestler that they had as well. Yeah. So we sort of stalked each other around the ring for a little bit. And then we did this thing, and he did this one move, which, considering I'm a lot bigger than him, we didn't think he'd be able to do, where he basically picked me up on his shoulders and then slammed me into the floor. And it looked great, and I sold it, and it was just really fun. Anyway, from on the back of that, there was one photograph which had me looking mean and giving a point, and I had a big glitter beard on as well. And fast forward a couple of years, as lockdown begins, I get a few messages from Damien. Says, I've had this idea, and he sends me a logo for the Pub Wrestling Federation. Sends me this picture that he's turned into the artwork for it, and then sends me a script. And that's how it began. And so I now have this alter ego, which is wonderful, because one of the things I said at the end of the stag do, we came out of the whole wrestling. I went, I love that. I could do this. I could be a wrestler, you know. And it was actually, I chatted to the guys about what they did and how they got into it and how much training they did. And I was really like, I had such a great time. It was so much fun. And now
he could obviously see that, couldn't he?
Yeah, completely. That's it. And so now, effectively, I am, or rather, I play somebody who was a wrestler. So I am the ginger
mindset.
Yeah, I am the ginger ninja, aka the champ, and yeah, I
got the Twitter account.
I mean, in many ways, it's just kind of like a simpler, stupider version of me.
It's an alter ego.
Yeah,
that's good.
And so
it's really good. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, well, it's been really fun to make, and also for me, it's been a stretch, because I've done a lot in terms of podcasting over the years, and this is not only a new genre for me, but also a new role in that I'm acting, and also I'm not taking the lead on the directing and the producing and the editing, although I help out a little bit with that. It's just very much a case of I get the script and we put it together. And again, it's a wonderful example of what you can do, because Damien hasn't met half the people that have guested on the show. And at no point has, because of the lockdown situation, has anybody who's been on the show been in the same room at the same time or online at the same time.
Right.
So everything's been recorded individually and stitched together for the whole series that we've put together. And
it's impressive.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It really has.
Certainly something else to keep you occupied during this difficult situation.
Yeah, and we've got merchandise as well. We have the T-shirt, which I should have put on today. We've also got there's the masks as well.
If Twitter there, is it? Can you see that?
Yeah. I can grab it if you want to bear with me. Hang on 1 second. Let me just...
Okay. Just put it on the screen there for those ones who are listening. If you go to the YouTube video, you'll be able to see it. It's a cool T-shirt, that. Merchandise. Here he is.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Available in all good wrestling sizes, so that's large, extra large, and extra, 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 extra large.
Cool.
So, yeah, and the really nice thing about it is we've created this whole universe, and effectively there's only two of us, and we'll have a guest on each episode usually, so somebody will come in. And we've been very lucky in that, because Damien's done a little bit of stand-up comedy, and through the work that I've done, I know quite a few stand-up comedians. We've invited people to be on and be part of it. And so generally...
these guests that you have on, have you created characters for them to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got this whole universe now. So we've gone from just having this one idea about a wrestler talking about his life to creating a whole series of fictional events that have taken place over his career, over the years of his career. From the age of 16. So there's the Royal Fumble, which is absolutely nothing to do with the Royal Rumble whatsoever, which started life in a fish and chip shop. And then there's characters like Post Office Wanker, Steve the Priest, Vienna, who's a 4'11", the smallest wrestler on the circuit, and one-time champion, and my current arch enemy. And then we've also moved it around and outside of that as well. So we've gone from not just looking back at events and meeting past wrestlers and people that we fought. And what's really nice is that the champ comes across as being a bit of a dimwit, to be honest, but gentle and doesn't really get it. So it's kind of like, oh, he's a bit of an idiot, but we kind of love him. Yeah, a lot of the wrestlers that we get on to chat about are really angry and really annoyed at him, and it just seems to be that there's either something that hasn't emerged yet that he's done in the past, or just he's a bit selfish and thoughtless in his simpleness.
So I haven't listened to it for recently, but so when you have some of those characters, are they getting quite heated with each other?
Yeah. So we've had those moments where some of them have come on and actually asked the champ to leave the room while they speak to Damien because they weren't involved. And then there's some people that have come on that he had a really good relationship with, some that the difficult relationship with, and then we've moved it as well. So much like real life wrestlers as well, there's some parallels in what's happened to the champ's career. So the champ has moved into commentary, then he's come out of retirement during a match.
Yeah.
Such a noob. He's come out of retirement while commentating on a match to reclaim the title. Then he's disappeared, and then he's popped up making a Hollywood film, and then he's now, without giving too much away, he's now currently like the Vince McMahon. He owns the franchise. He owns the rights. Yeah. So, and then we just did an episode just before Christmas where and probably should have got you involved in this actually. He put together a Christmas single. And it's quite rocky. It's probably right up your street. So a modern sort of slightly metal version of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas." Yeah. Instead titled "I Want to Wrestle Santa." So.
Of course, it's called that. Of course. What else would it be called?
Yeah. So that was the champ's bid for Christmas number 1. Failed. But that's how it goes. And I think that's a recurring theme in the series. And yeah, what's really nice is we've had some really, really good feedback from people that are wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans alike, which has been good. So there's a lot of references to things and comparisons to events that happened in the real world of wrestling.
Yeah.
And then enough just general comedy that people enjoy it.
Has coronavirus been mentioned in it?
Has it? We did talk. So there's some stuff that we didn't do, and we do have some adverts in, and we did. So one of the feedback we've had is the little adverts that we have in it are people's favorite bits, which I'm going to take as a compliment. Not that the other bits are awful, but we have our own little sponsors that we create and produce the whole thing in the middle. And we did do one which was the champ giving a COVID message, and
like Chris Whitty or something.
Yeah, and talking about like how he was going to sort COVID out, but his approach was a very much non-COVID friendly way. However, we just did decide in that we just put that to one side for now. Right. But
he'd probably want to wrestle COVID to the ground.
Exactly, which is not socially distant at all, and it really highly increases your chances of contracting COVID. Yeah. So rolling around with a big sweaty man. So yeah, so that's the champ, and we're really pleased with it actually, and we did have some plans to. We still plan to, however, the current situation makes it impossible, to do a little TV pilot with it as well. So
okay,
or possibly an Edinburgh show,
a YouTube sort of series as well.
Yeah, like the next Cobra Kai. This is.
I was thinking, in my head, I was imagining like if you had someone who could do it, they could animate your episodes. That would be cool. Yeah,
well, I mean that would be absolutely brilliant. In fact, we just had a conversation with an artist yesterday about taking some of the images and maybe even just for artwork to begin with. But yeah, I think an animated version of that would be great. A guy I used to work with does these really cool things on Instagram where he does like Game Boy versions of real life situations. So like the Game Boy sequences, the animated bits. Exactly, yeah. So we're kind of building up this universe, which is great. So and it's I'd say it's probably not got the same budget, but in terms of scale, it does rival the MCU. And in ambition, because of the amount of characters that we've got and the fact that we've got events going back 40 years that lead on to like what's happening now. But yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's just a little bit of silliness, but it's a lot of fun. One of my favorite reviews actually came from Dan Maudsley, who won the British Podcast Award for Best True Crime Drama, and he's a journalist with the BBC, and he reviewed one of our episodes and retweeted it, unbeknownst to us until we saw the tweet, and just said, in this time of fake news and bad news, you know, maybe we just need some silly reality, and did this nice little push towards what we were doing. And I mean, I'm not suggesting bribery here in any ways, but by doing that, he did get himself a part in our Christmas episode. So if you want to tweet nice things about us, you could find yourself on the show.
That's cool. I was going to say before, going back to Pods Up North, I was going to ask, to put in a nutshell, what Pods Up North is, but because we've got quite a lot more listeners since the last time you're on the show, but you segued perfectly to that without me saying anything. And you were on episode 61, so if anyone wants to go back, listen to episode 61. And I was going to ask, what's it looking like for 2021 as far as Pods Up North goes then?
So 2021 Pods Up North, the plan is, and we're about to announce it, is we're going to do, inspired by how well our virtual event went, we're going to do a series of virtual events throughout 2021 and build towards, hopefully, having a live event in November. Obviously, you will have probably heard by this point, because just as we've come to record this, they've announced Glastonbury's been cancelled for this year, second year running, and there's lots going around that it could be September before gigs return to normal, which is pretty devastating in many ways.
Will be vaccinated by September, November time. So
yeah, I mean, there's also been stories coming out as well about the cruise industry, about saying that they'll open up, but everyone will have to be vaccinated before going on.
Yeah,
I think this is going to be a common thing now. It's, you know, instead of showing your proof that you're 18 before you can get into a venue, you're going to have to show your
like
wherever they've stuck the needle.
COVID ID.
I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I know they've been saying like getting the jabs into the arms, but I know that there are some injections you get in other places. So hopefully, it could launch a whole new range of fashion as well. So if you're going out to a gig or a club, you have a patch on your shoulder that you pull across so that you can see the scab. I don't know if you'll be able to, if it'll leave a mark, the way that TB did. Yeah.
So I was going to ask, like, so when you did it virtually, your virtual event, did that allow you to reach more people than you fit in your venue in your first one?
Yeah, of course, because suddenly now you're on the internet, so you can reach more people. So we basically doubled what we'd done before.
Yeah.
We reached a lot of people in America that came in that had heard about what we'd done. A couple of people across Europe that wanted to be involved, and also further afield in the UK as well. So yeah, it was a different way of doing it, and really, really the potential there for it is very exciting, because obviously there are people that have the same issues in Europe and in America that are having them in Bolton and in Glasgow and in Dublin, you know. So actually it's given us a way of reframing what we're doing. And so we've expanded now as well, and we've launched our own podcast. So Pods Up North has now got its podcast Pods Up. Future episode featuring behind the lockdown coming up. But we've got our first 3 episodes out, and they're available. And the idea behind that is just looking at different podcasts within this community and what they're doing and how they're doing it. Right, so
what's it called?
There you go. Pods Up. Yeah. And so you'll find the first episode was Talk About It, Mate. Then we did Dark Coffee. And then episode 3 was Paradise. There you go. Yeah, the little magnifying glass around the microphone. That's exactly it.
Yep.
Yeah. And
subscribed.
So
I am subscribed.
Next couple of episodes. Yeah, so go have a listen. And the idea behind that is, rather than just sitting down having a chat, we're getting different producers involved with that as well to show off the skills. So the idea is that eventually each episode will feature a different podcast and a different production crew. So I'm kind of chairing and interviewing a lot of the people in it at the minute, but that's not necessarily going to be all the way. unless everybody likes what I do, and then I'll stay. But if you don't like me,
so
don't worry, that will change.
Now they are you.
Yes, although some of them you'll hear more of me, and some of them you'll hear less of me. So actually the very first interview is done by Charles. So talk about it, mate. So again, just because of the way we find ourselves in lockdown, it makes it more difficult. But the idea behind it is to, rather than just do a little sit down and go, here, I'm having a chat with Marc about Behind the Noise, it's actually going to be more of a analysis of everything. Right. And so, almost like like a South Bank Show episode, but all done with love as well. So we're looking at things that are good, and it could just be as well that, you know, this show's brand new. They've only got 5 episodes out, but what's really good about it is they've taken this and they've done this. So, for example, Talk About It, Mate, which is the first episode, is, as the name suggests, it's around a community of people that encourage you to express your feelings and talk about things and not hold things in.
Yeah.
And there's a whole community around that, and that's really helped them by having the podcast, because they've had to move virtually, and they do Zoom meetings as well, but they have their own podcast built up around that as well. Then we did Dark Coffee, which again tackles issues of mental health. But what's very interesting about that is that started off as a podcast and has become a business. And Alice, that does that show, now uses her experience and the connections to go into workplaces and help people with their mental health issues. And then Paradise, which is the last one that came out just before Christmas, is about the British Podcast Awards Gold Award winner. And that's kind of the dream job of traveling several continents, spending 6 months to a year making a podcast. But it's more about everything else that happened behind the scenes, and some of the technology that was involved, and some of the issues that you face in building that. And the next couple of episodes are going to include Craig Parkinson and the Two Shot podcast, and podcast. We're going to have the voiceover social and Diary of a Space Archivist, which is this wonderful little sci-fi, one-woman sci-fi podcast, kind of like Red Dwarf, which is, she writes it, produces it, acts in it, and she does that all on her own in Sheffield. Well, she's in Wakefield actually, and it's brilliant. And she started doing that podcast. What's great about that? She started doing that podcast because she was teaching and lecturing at the time, and wanted to show people, her students, how to do that. And so she'd made this series and put it out there, and didn't even check to see how many listeners that she had. She wasn't interested in that. She was just doing it purely for those people. There's a very pure reason behind it. And then when she went to look, she was like, oh, and now she has a Patreon, and she came this close to signing a big deal with a sweet manufacturer as well, to be featured in the show. But so there's all these little interesting stories that are going to come out. And the idea behind it is again, like with Pods Up North, is just to pick up on podcasters who are doing really interesting things, great things, and give them a spotlight.
That's cool. So do you think when you do, say you do get to do an actual physical event this year, do you think you'll coincide it with a virtual aspect of it as well? Now that you've now that you were sort of forced into doing it, but it might have actually you might not think, hey, you know what, you could actually do both.
Yeah, and the thing is, let's be brutally honest about it. Just because they say we can go back to normal doesn't mean people will. Because there are people, one, that have got used to being this way, and two, people that are really excited about going back, but will actually be pretty frightened. I think right now most people would rather just go around and see their family and have that time and share those times than necessarily go into a room with 1,000 other people and all the potentials. Because all we've had for the last sort of year has been all this bad news about how it spreads and how it goes around. And so I think the fear will keep people away for a long time as well. So we're definitely going to have to give that option. And also, it's just going to be very interesting from a logistical thing, putting it together, because potentially we're going to need a venue that's 3 times the size of what we would have needed just to allow for social distancing.
Yeah.
Potentially, and even then we don't know if people will come.
That's it. It's about confidence about people going back into crowded rooms.
Yeah, and then with that, you then go, well, will it achieve what we want it to achieve if we don't have that same energy, that same atmosphere?
But yeah, I suppose maybe the first one will rely a bit more on the virtual aspect, and then when you get to 2022, confidence will have returned by then, so we'll all be getting to a bit more.
We'll all have these virtual bubbles that Apple or someone have designed that stop anybody moving into your personal space.
But I always think for you guys to be able to have like, say you filmed it as well as people being able to go, and then people who couldn't come anywhere because of geographical locations or whatever could then tune in live, or like you say, you recorded it and they could watch it later.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something when we put the first one on, we were just so focused on making something happen. We didn't really think about that moving forward. It was just
you didn't want to take too much on at once on your first go, did you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we did live stream some of it, but so we had the option that we could have done that. But it's just where we came from that mindset. And I think having done the virtual event now, we definitely see the potential for that. And that sounds really short-sighted, considering that the medium that we work in and the times that we work in, but actually
I think you have to be short-sighted at the moment.
Yeah, and you take so much on. It's just, and I think that's the same thing coming again back to full circle to where we started with getting the podcast done. Is like your first thing should be focusing on getting something made.
Yeah,
not actually like the amount of times that I speak to people and they've got all these questions about the podcast and where to put it and how to do these things, and they haven't even pressed record.
Yeah. You sometimes get people say, I want to do a podcast. And he's like, well, what do you want to do it about? And they go, oh, I don't really know yet. It's like, well, you need to have an idea first. You need to know why you want to do it before you do it.
Yeah. I think sometimes on that is the easiest way to get around that particular issue is perspective. And so just ask a friend, ask a really good friend what you should podcast about, because then they'll tell you, you never shut up about this on Facebook or on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that's what you should do it about.
Something that you're passionate about.
You're already creating the content that way as well. And that's what people don't realize is you have this thing where you kind of model yourself on other people. And that's good because it helps you learn, but also it can be very dangerous because then you're kind of going, oh, I'm not successful. I'm not successful because I'm not as good as them. Like you might have, I don't know, you might have modeled yourself on Def Leppard, right? For example, when you were starting off as a band. And you might have done that just purely as to get the band together, to learn some songs, to get some stuff out there and going there. But then you need to move on and do something else, because if you start going, well, I need to have the same fans as them, it's like, well, you've only really got one option, which is to become a Def Leppard tribute band. Yeah, which is not what you want. And similarly, you don't want to be, do you want to become a Joe Rogan tribute?
Yeah, exactly. The one thing you have is you. The unique thing you have is you.
And you can definitely learn something by listening to Joe Rogan. You can learn something by listening to Def Leppard. You can learn something by whatever you engage with. And that's kind of what we're doing with the podcast Pods Up. But at the same time, it's like, what can you take from this and adapt and be yours? It's kind of that Bruce Lee philosophy, absorb what is useful, throw away what is not. And so, to take those parts and you go, I really like Joe Rogan. I really like the guests that Joe Rogan gets on and how he gives them time to talk. Brilliant. All right. You can definitely take aspects of that and use that. You might also say, I really can't stand how he spends the first 6 minutes of every episode just doing adverts and it's really boring. So then just go straight into it at the start of your show. Just start straight away and go, here we are. There you go.
So in retrospect, do you still listen to Joe Rogan much? Do you think Spotify moves affected anything?
Well, Spotify, spending lots of money that did start with Pods Up North, may I add. So
you were the first.
They came in with Pods Up North, then they got Joe Rogan, then they got Harry and Meghan. So and they'll keep spending money. They'll keep bringing things in. I think that there's going to be more big names announced. This is not me with insider information. This is just I get the feeling that there'll be at least one more big show coming along.
Because it was at the time it was a big like, oh wow, but
again this is a really good thing. Now obviously there's going to be relatively few people that make 100 million from their podcast. and let's be honest, there's relatively few people that make a couple of £100 from their podcast, but it's definitely done a wonderful thing because it brought podcasting again further up the chain of conversation. It's becoming more normal. More people know about it, and we bear in mind we're in a situation where you only have to go back 5 or 6 years, and whenever you talked about a podcast, people wouldn't say Joe Rogan or I listen to this. People would say, "What's a podcast?"
Yeah, that's, you know, and it was died down a bit now.
Yeah, completely. And you will still have people that go, "I don't get what a podcast is. I don't know what a podcast is."
Yeah.
And that, you're always going to have that.
Celebrities having their own podcasts has helped with that as well.
Yeah, completely. But that's all happened in a really short space of time as well.
Yeah.
And it was a thing like, you know, people often reference Serial, but also My Dad Wrote a Porno. Those kinds of shows that really sort of brought things forward. The BBC in 2018 launching Sounds, which gave an equal platform to podcast, music, and radio. That pushed it forward as well. Although did have an effect where some people just assumed that still podcasts were radio shows that you'd missed again. But again, really, this comes back to the other point that I said in that, you know, it's just a medium, and ultimately the experience of listening to a podcast is no different to the experience of listening to a radio show, because what you're doing is you're listening. The difference is the content.
Yeah. Well, I suppose in a way, radio, you have to be there. With podcasts, so you can listen anytime, unless it's a podcast of a radio show.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's the convenience of it. You can't argue with the. How do you explain it to a podcast to someone when they ask what a podcast is? What do you say?
So I would say it depends who they are. If it's somebody that wants to make a podcast or somebody that wants to listen to it.
Right.
So, because from the making it point of view, they often come to me with the question of how long should it be?
Yeah.
And that's a question that many different people have answers on. So I will just tell you this. The difference between a podcast and a radio show is people often will make their podcasts as long as a radio show because they feel that's like what people are used to or what the way things should be done. The reason why a radio show is as long as it is because there's something else coming up afterwards. It has to stop at that point.
Yeah.
Because somebody's coming in to do the news or travel, or somebody's coming in to do the next bit. And I know all about this because I'm back on the radio now.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
Yeah.
Well, the other difference is, though, on a podcast, you don't have to stop for adverts, commercials, or the weather, or we're going to talk to this guy, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. When you actually break down the content of someone talking on a radio show, say from like an hour, they probably only talk for 35 minutes.
Yeah, completely. It's like the kind of when the American TV hour is 44 minutes with all the adverts that you put back in.
Because when you get them on the streaming services, we cut out with all the adverts. You go, oh, I thought it was an hour. It's only 43 minutes.
Be careful though, because you know, with all this investment from the likes of Spotify, they want to recoup that investment, and so that's coming through an increased amount of adverts on all the platforms that you listen to. For the podcasts that allow that, there's more ability now for different products coming out that allow people to have their own dynamic insertion without necessarily being with a big company. So you are going to hear adverts on podcasts. That's the way it's going to go.
Well, Spotify will have no trouble recouping their investment because the money that they spent on getting these exclusive podcasts, that means more time. If the more time people listen to podcasts on Spotify, the less time they're spending paying artists for music. So
Exactly. And Spotify have to renegotiate all the time with their artists. And if they're saying, you know, yes, all right, we've got more people listening, but half of the time they're listening to podcasts, that helps in their negotiation. So I can understand that approach, but it's very interesting that for all the growth of Spotify, still Apple dominates in terms of global podcast listening.
Of course.
You're looking at 75-80%. It's all done through Apple.
Spotify is going up, but do you think Apple will always be number one?
I think the driver from that is kind of historic in that America's really driven podcast listening, and American gadgets is very opposite to Europe. So you're looking at 80% of Americans will have an Apple device.
Yeah, it's very Apple oriented,
whereas
isn't it?
over here in Europe, it's very Android.
Yeah.
And because Apple kind of, as they did in having iTunes for music and sort of leading the way in that, they kind of set up the whole podcast market in a way by having that directory. Things are changing there in that other people are starting to set up directories now as well. The original Podfather is setting up a new thing as well, which is growing, which would be interesting to see how that goes. But it kind of feels that while they've had this historically, Apple have never really flexed their muscles on podcasts.
No. I think
they have a podcast department.
They got there first. They were the first ones there, so that's their main.
I mean, some people will say that podcasting was created through RSS engineering in the 2003, 2004.
Well, yeah.
And then in 2005, Apple invented it.
They've worked out the perfect way to facilitate it, I suppose.
Yeah, but that's exactly what they did with iTunes. Is they made it easier to buy music legally.
Yeah,
which is what to get it illegally.
That's what all of our people wanted.
That's what
it should have been record companies who did that, not a computer company.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
But that's another debate. Yeah, that's another conversation. And obviously, we've got another one coming along with the whole what's happening in Parliament with the MPs investigating streaming services now as well. Yeah. So that's going to happen. But Apple still dominate. Spotify are growing, but the whole market is growing. It's really interesting that there's been a couple of people that have come along and sort of set themselves up as being the new platform, the new Netflix of podcasting. And Luminary, for example, spent lots and lots of money, and yet for all the money that they've spent, they hold a tiny fraction of the podcast market. So we are seeing a thing where, like we're seeing with TV, where you've got now you've got Disney Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all those different channels that you need to subscribe to watch all your favorite shows. Similarly, with Joe Rogan being Spotify exclusive, we're going to see more of these things happen. So you're going to have to go to certain platforms to listen to certain people.
It's like like if you want Star Wars, you have to go Disney. Yeah.
Now, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, time will tell. I mean, as a Star Wars fan, it's great to go on there and have all the Star Wars stuff there in the one place.
Your average person can't, if everything's split into 20 services where all your favorite stuff, you can't afford to pay £10-20 a month for all of those. You just can't.
Well, just even in time, and bear in mind as well, like the average person, and I forget. I want to say 4, but it might be 7. But it's between 4 and 7. The average person will listen to between 4 and 7 podcasts. So that's a really interesting thing there. Mm-hmm. When you think about if you are creating a podcast, even though if you know specifically who that podcast is for, who that person is, not only do you have to get them to know about you, but what you have to do is get them to ditch one of the shows that they already listen to listen to yours as well.
There's usually a couple of shows where they're sort of on the edge with it anyway. So if a really good one comes in they like, they go, right, that one's gone.
Are they just leave it and they just don't refresh it? They just sits there in the background.
I'm subscribed to 130 something podcasts, but realistically, I only have time to listen to about 5 or 6 a week. It's a very short window, so. To me, the description and if they have guests, depends who the guest is, and also the description of what they're talking about. I think that's quite key, because if a lot of people are in the same position where they've only got all these podcasts but all this space, then how you present it is key. It's like when you flick through a magazine, what draws your eye, what draws your attention.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point and something that a lot of people lose sight of as well. Like, really think about the people that are listening to your show and what they do and how they're going to consume that, because that's going to affect how you produce it and execute it. Otherwise, there's a lot of people that make stuff out there that's it's quite arrogant in a sense, in that it takes them a long time to get anywhere, do anything or say anything. It's just, and sometimes you might be in the mood for that. If you like that personality, you don't mind them just saying nothing for a few minutes. But actually, people have like short time spans in which they can listen. And on the other the other side of that coin is, if you get straight into it, your episode is shorter, which means they'll probably listen to another episode then as well, which increases your downloads. You know, so that there's that way of looking for it. And like, just if you really know who your ideal audience is, if your audience is, and you're making a show specifically for people that drive vans or truckers and that drive around all day, then you know what? You can make a podcast that's 3 hours long every day, because they've got the time on the road to listen to that.
They would prefer
you can
that.
appeal to them. Yeah, and that gives them time. They can dive in and they can listen to that. If you're making a podcast and you want Gary Vaynerchuk to listen to it, you want Alan Sugar to listen to it, you want these kinds of business people, you got like 20 minutes in the morning in the gym, and so that's your window. So maybe that should guide how you're going to do it. So maybe you're thinking about, right, this is 20 minutes or it's 7 minutes to fit, so that it's time that they can listen from the minute they step into the bathroom, they hit play, you know, they have their shower, they do everything, and then they come out of the bathroom, and that's it. You build it around that kind of mindset, or whatever that is. But then you've got to recognize that it's not going to work for everybody. So you've got to take that into consideration, but still make it work for you. So don't necessarily throw everything out that you've ever done to make somebody happy who might listen or might not.
Yeah. I was going to say, which social media platform do you prefer? What works best for you?
It's a good question. I think what's interesting with, in terms of podcast promotion, what Spotify have done recently in the promo cards for the podcast, because it suddenly makes Instagram a much better platform to have, because you drop your promo card on there, and by hitting the link, there's a link built into it, which you can go to it straight. Whereas normally the problem with Instagram is when you put something up, you have to refer to a link in the bio. You can't have a link on the actual site. So that makes Instagram a more interesting platform, and I've definitely been listening to more people's podcast clips that they put on in terms of their audiograms and headliners. The Twitter is probably the one that I use the most still traditionally, but the problem with all of these, and people still don't realize this, is that whenever you put something, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, you're only going to be seen by 10% of your followers.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the way the algorithm works. And then even then, that being seen could just be them scrolling past.
Yeah, that's classed as an interaction, isn't it?
Yeah. So what you really need to do, I mean, even if you're doing really well, you're only going to sort of push up to about 18-20% of it. So there's different ways to look at this, and there's courses you can take and go on, and it's worth looking into and investigating, although bear in mind that the algorithm does change all the time. But I would say to you, whenever you have any interaction about your show on any social media platform, whether somebody's liked it, whether somebody's commented, whatever that is, somebody sent a message, absolutely, like, you should be responding to that.
Totally.
If somebody's taken the time to message you, seek you out, send you a message because of your podcast, message them back.
Yeah, definitely.
Say thank you.
I agree.
Ask them some other things.
Get some sort of rapport conversation going.
Yeah. You at the very worst, you'll get a little feel for what somebody thinks about the show, or they won't message back. At best, what you're going to get is somebody who will then message you and say, oh, there's a really weird noise in the middle of your episode, and you realize you've got to re-upload because you've done a funny edit. You're going to get somebody that really wants to come and see you when you're doing a live show. You're going to get somebody that wants to get involved and maybe manage your social media for you. Also, what you're also going to have is with things like likes and comments, the more you interact with them, the more feedback you get from them. Again, the more that ticks the algorithm, and the more that's going to push you further up, and it's just going to build your community. And that's the one thing that came out of Pods Up Level Up, and again, links are there if you want to go and see it. It seemed to come up quite a lot, was how do you serve your community? What is it that you're doing that serves your community? Whatever that community is, however way you're doing that. And so your community is more than just you. You're building something bigger. So when people get involved and say, I like this, and it could just be that somebody comments on this now and says, oh, I went to the first Pods Up North, I really liked it. Right. And they've commented on the message. And then if I see that, you see that, you jump in and say, brilliant. Did you go to the online one?
Yeah.
If not, here's a link to it, blah, 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 blah. Then you say, who was the standout for you? I really enjoyed when this person was talking. Yeah. That was really good. And then you go, oh, I've never heard of that person. Oh, check out that podcast. And you just start that conversation, and you will learn. You come away learning something from it. But what we're doing here is we're building communities when really at its source, you have no right to an audience. Effectively, when you make a podcast and you put it out there, you're just opening a window and screaming. You're just opening a window and talking and shouting. Like the majority of people will just walk past and not pay you any attention whatsoever. What is going to build that audience is when people start interacting with you and say, I like what you did. Don't just take it and be smug. Interact with that person. Say thank you. Learn to take a compliment. And it will make you feel good for doing that. It will also make the other person feel good for having said something nice to you as well. Even if somebody says something mean and horrible to you, roll with it. Take it.
Yeah.
Because, they could have said something mean and horrible about anybody, but they've chosen to say it about you. And they've taken time to listen enough to do that.
Usually I find people who would do that go out their way to do that. That's all they do to everyone. So
yeah,
don't feel special.
There's a wonderful example of this. Matthew is one of the guys that runs the podcast academy up in Inverness. He runs a podcast called The Scottish Podcast, and I bumped into him in February last year, just before all this happened, in Birmingham at PodCon UK 2020. And he, on his little stall that he had there, he sells beer mats, or coasters for the Americans listening. And the coasters and beer mats are basically the 1-star reviews he's had on Apple, right? And so he turns them into beer mats and then sells them for £1, right? and it's his biggest selling piece of merchandise.
That's good.
And so, yeah, and so now he has this thing where, because actually on the scale of things, you could get 100 5-star reviews. That's not going to make any money for you at all. It looks good and you got a good reputation, right? He's had like 7 1-star reviews, and he's made a couple of £100 from that just in selling beer mats. That's so funny. It's a great way of taking the energy and rolling with it.
Plus, like, don't be disparaged when people don't get any interaction. I think I was probably about 1.5 years before I got like an email from someone about something saying that they liked a particular guest. So,
the thing is, there is a weird mentality with contacting something like that, like a friend. Not everyone will do it. We used to have a rule of thumb when I worked in radio, which was, if somebody phones the show, that gives you an idea that you've got each phone call equals 100 listeners. If somebody writes to you, that equates to 1,000 listeners. And that's because only 1 in 1,000 people would ever write a letter to a radio station.
It's a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort to do that. And so it's a rough rule of thumb to go with it, but you've got to recognize that it's, for somebody to take time to do that, there's something a little odd about them.
I mean, like, when we got to when I used to do studio ones, every episode I would get comments. But I've been going only 4 years now, so you've just got to. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I wouldn't factor it into your, like, if it's happening.
Yeah,
great. If it's not, don't worry about it.
I think the problem with it is that when we start a podcast, we become obsessed with figures. And it's literally you're checking 3-4 times a day. Yeah. And it's fine, but I'd say what is of far more value is one email or one comment or one message from somebody.
Yeah.
Rather than like if you've had, I mean, it's interesting if you get a spike of a couple of 100 listeners one day and trying to find out where that came from or what caused that. Always really interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes you years to find out. We had this huge spike once on the left side, and it took me a long time to figure out what it was. And it was only when I bumped to this guy in America at this podcast conference, and I'd met him the year before. And he's a Swedish football journalist, and he'd listened to the show, really liked it, and then wrote an article in Swedish about like the best football podcast to listen to, and put ours at the top. But obviously, because it was in Swedish, I never found it online because I don't speak Swedish. But it was a national paper in Sweden, which generated a big spike in content for us as well. But I didn't know until I bumped into Patrick the next year, and he mentioned that he'd done this. And I was like, when was that? Of course. There you go. Yeah.
I can tell that Twitter is your...
Yeah. That was...
Here's some stats for you. You joined Twitter, I'm just looking on screen here, in October 14, and you've posted 4,912 tweets.
Is that a lot?
I don't know. It sounds a lot to me.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I'm in the circles of people who have a lot more and have been a lot longer. I mean, one of my friends, his Twitter handle is @Matt. He was like one of the first people to get on Twitter. He was there before Stephen Fry.
Good.
Yeah,
that's good.
So,
I'd say for me, Twitter is my least. I get very little on Twitter. Right. I mean, I post similar content out there. Instagram by a mile for me, absolute mile.
Yeah. The interesting thing though is there's a guy up here called Steve Blears who does a gardening podcast with his wife, and he just did a very interesting experiment where he used SEO to boost his podcast and had a massive spike in listeners. Like we're talking like he went from having a couple of hundred to 10,000 listeners.
Wow.
So he did a whole search of like, you know, because at the end of the day he realized that most people will still find a podcast by that's the one thing that you go to. If somebody wants to find something, they go to Google.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And so if you have it so that it ranks high in Google, and so he was creating a blog for every episode that was linking back into the audio. He was titling his episodes using keyword searches around the area as well. And so the Google keyword searches is free. So you just check that every couple of days, every couple of weeks, and sort of bring that up to speed. And that really boosted his audience. And literally he saw over a 3-month period, he saw an increase in 10,000 listeners. Wow. Which for those of you who, just to put a level on that, 10,000 listeners is at the point at which your podcast provider, your platform will say, we'll start selling adverts for you now. It's that sometimes kind of level that you're talking about.
Sometimes it can be less than that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's nothing to stop you going out and getting yourself on your own before then. But, and it's not always the right thing to do to go and get that, because even though you're at that 10,000 listeners, you know, that what you actually walk away with might only be 50 quid for those 10,000 listeners, depending, you know, on what the deal is and what the thing is. And really, if you think about that, you know, if you had 10,000 people at a gig, you'd be getting a lot more than 50 quid from that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
I love the way you just went, yeah.
You would. But to explain to someone, like, even if you've got 100 listeners, imagine getting 100 people in a room just to listen to you talk.
Oh, amazing. Like, I mean, how many people have, I mean, obviously, again, these days, it's not happening right now, but even in normal circumstances, very few people have over 100 people at their wedding.
Yeah, true.
You know, true. And that's a big, and you look how difficult it is to get all those people together and all the things you have to organize to get them in a room. And if you think, well, I can get more than that, and all I've got to do is literally turn on the computer.
Yeah.
You know, that suddenly makes life a lot easier in terms of building an audience and building a connection. But you know what? The thing is, this is something we've maybe skipped over a little bit, and I can't remember if we talked about this before, but there's been a theme that's come up a few times about growing the audience, getting more people. But you know what? Those 100 people that you've got now, or those 50 people that you've got listening, or however long you've been going for, they've been coming back regularly. They're your core audience. And I think what tends to happen is people want to grow their audience and they forget about those people. They forget about those 50 people, and they're just more obsessed about what's going to come next. And so they maybe change the format too much, or they go these different ways. But those 50 people, they're your advocates, because they've stayed with you when you weren't very good. They've stayed with you when you didn't know what you were doing. Right? and they've got to know you, and they enjoy you, and they see you as a friend. And so if those people are listening to you, they're really valuable. And if you can get insight from them or support from them, even better, because they're the ones that are going to talk about you on another podcast. They're the ones that are going to make people listen to you when they're sat next to them on the train, when you're allowed to do that again. Yeah. They're the ones that are going to like promote you on their social media.
Do you still think mailing lists are important these days, just in general?
I know a lot of people that do. And the reason for that is, well, I would say yes. Look at Donald Trump. So great example is that as well. So Donald Trump, 78 million followers. Yeah. 78 million followers on Twitter.
Yeah. Gone. Now, that is because he is on a private company's website and adhering to their terms and conditions. Now, I know there's been this lot of talk about the First Amendment rights in America, but just for those of you who don't know that, First Amendment means the right to free speech cannot be censored by the government. It does not cover private company, which Twitter is, which Facebook is, which Instagram is. We've all seen these things where influencers have had their deplatformed.
They've been deplatformed and lost hundreds of thousands of pounds or whatever that they were exposed to. With an email list, you own that.
Yeah.
You own that. Now, you have to be very careful how you build that up and grow that with data protection laws. But once you've got that, you've got that. And you've got that access to people. Now, yes, email's not done the same way. Not everybody opens all their emails that comes through. It's a relatively small percentage of open rate is seen as a success these days. But again, the key thing is that you own that. And you've got access to that. And if you're taken off, if Donald Trump had everybody's email address when they took him off Twitter, if he had all their followers' email address, he'd be laughing. He wouldn't care. Yeah, that would. He'd be paying a lot a month per MailChimp for sending that out.
They couldn't.
But yeah, so I would say is that. But again, the thing is, with a mailing list, it's like growing your audience. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, how do you go from zero to having that? And the lady that was our keynote on Pods Up Level Up, Janet Murray, I mentioned before, her whole marketing prowess is about growing your audience. So if you look her up, she's a great podcast. She's on like 500 episodes now as well, and she's putting stuff out all the time. And she's focused on that, and she swears by this. This is somebody that I learned this from. That the importance of your email list is that you own it, you've got it, and that it can't be taken away from you like that.
Absolutely, yeah. I do have one, but like a lot of people, I don't utilize it as much as I should. What are the best ways that people use to galvanize a list, like on your website, like sign up here sort of thing?
There's different ways of doing it. So there's the lead generators. I know people have done it where they've released a book, an ebook, a free ebook. And part of the conditions of the free ebook is you give your email address, or they ask for your email address. Yeah. And that's a way to do that. And then they'll sell their second book by doing it that way. Yes, by offering free stuff online, videos, courses, those kind of things, saying, if you give your email address, I'll give you this thing. There's all these different ways of doing it. Or just for, if you want to know more, if you want to get in touch, those different ways. It depends on what you're doing, what way is going to work best for you. Again, if it, I suppose it was like in the old days, it used to be like, you'd maybe have a clipboard at the back of the room when you're doing a gig, sign up to our mailing list.
Yeah.
And then you'd spend about three weeks trying to translate what's this? That bounce back. That doesn't make any sense.
People trying to write their email address doesn't always work.
Yeah, and I've seen people were doing that with the track and trace when we were allowed to go into pubs and bars.
Yeah.
They were still having that handwritten thing, and it doesn't work.
No.
Yeah.
No. But so how have you been with COVID then? Have you been lucky?
Yeah. If you can say that, I did have a test before Christmas because I did get ill, and was impressed at how quickly all that happened. But a couple of my friends have had it. One 10 years older, one 10 years younger. My cousin's had it. His girlfriend had it. and my other cousin over in Canada might have it at the minute as well. But yeah, I've also known a couple of people that I've met, friends of friends, have had it, and unfortunately succumbed to it as well.
Yeah.
So it's this odd thing where, especially this time around, it's definitely more real. Like,
yeah,
I think the first time
the net
we went,
sort of closing in a bit. Because you're hearing closer to home stories about it.
So yeah, that's completely it. Because the first lockdown, it was a case of everybody followed the rules, everybody joined in. Yeah, but nobody. It was a hearsay. The only person I knew was an ex-girlfriend of mine who was a nurse, and so it was kind of understandable in that situation that she got that. And thankfully, she was okay from it. But then this time, it seems to be that there's more evidence of it. We all know people that have been through it and are suffering from it, or have had near misses with it, and yet people don't seem to be taking it as seriously in some ways. It's a weird dichotomy that we're in.
I think people are starting to now, on the whole. I think that's starting to hit home.
Well, I think the thing that's happening now is, you know, we're again, the day that we're recording this, it's just almost exactly 4 weeks since Christmas Day, and strangely enough, we're seeing the biggest spike in cases and deaths and those kinds of things. And sadly, it looks like that's very related, which is a horrible thing.
Christmas,
you know,
the effects of Christmas are happening now, a month later.
Yeah.
I mean, the
and
cases,
you know what? I think this
are going down day by day, but the deaths haven't caught up to that yet. They're still going up.
No, I think the problem with this is pretty much any kind of a virus movie we've ever seen has been pretty accurate in some of the things that it's done, apart from the time scale. So in something like 28 days later, it takes 10 seconds from when you make contact to becoming fully infected and fully blown. And we can work with that. We can completely go, okay, so you've got this. We can see that you've got it. We can take action. But because there is this delay where it can be 15 days from that moment to when you get it, it's almost like we're suddenly all thinking in the moment rather than thinking in, you know, being able to plan for the future. And it seems to be this thing of like, well, I haven't got it now, so I'm all right.
You could have it. You wouldn't know it.
Yeah. It's and it just seems to be this other thing that's divided us as well. Like, we've gone from like being like Brexiteer, Ramona, we've gone from being pro-Trump, anti-Trump, and now it's you know, you've got to be you believe in it and take the precautions, or you don't wear a mask and you're anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? Do we still need to be divided about stuff? Can we not just stick our heads together and figure this out?
I know.
You know, and I mean, again, I think the thing is, anybody that was in a position of power now would not be having an easy ride of things.
No.
Absolutely.
No,
I think there's, but I think the problem is I see so many people that I know, I'm friends with a lot of musicians that was their livelihood completely, that have been destroyed by this. Friends that have set up podcasting businesses in the last couple of years that are not covered by the furlough payments or anything, or the self-employed payments, that are continuing to be ignored every time the government's asked about it. It's just like they deflect and move to the different subject. But these are real people. And I think like the long-term effect of this is whoever, you know, those people that have been ignored, those 3 million people that have been ignored in terms of they've set up their own business, they've done the right things. They're now told that they're not going to get any money because of when they set their business up. They're also, because they've done the right thing and they've saved up and maybe to get a deposit for a house, that's excluded them from getting universal credit.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and this has happened to a couple of friends of mine. These people are, no matter what their background is politically voting, you know, those people are not likely to, you know, want this government again. Similarly, a lot of people who've lost people and been affected by COVID will look at what's happened and go, you know, these are the things that stay with you. A lot of things that happen in politics people forget overnight, but these things people will remember.
Definitely.
And it's going to be there's going to be a big shift politically on the back of this and all that's happening. And I don't know, it's
a lot of it'll come out afterwards.
It's a very interesting time to be around.
It'll be like a retrospective.
Oh,
let's look at this as a whole from beginning to end once it's over. It's going to be interesting.
I just hope we're all around to do that.
I know. But I generally think that the general consensus of the whole thing is shifting now with so many cases that people are hearing that are just not just in the news, but like from people that they know. I think that has a huge impact.
Yeah. And like I say, I was ill before Christmas, and I think it was just flu. And often you say, "Oh, I've had the flu," and it's not flu. But I had proper flu, and it knocked me for a week. I was out, and I was like, if this isn't as bad as COVID, and I'm pretty healthy and relatively young, you start to appreciate why this thing can.
Yeah, I know a couple of people who've had it.
Take people out.
It's the worst illness they've ever had, ever.
One of my co-presenters on the Football Social Daily, Natalie, she does stuff for Man City, hosting their match day events and stuff, and she got it back in the first wave, and we were talking about this on the show because she didn't think she had long COVID, she was definitely even a month or 6 weeks after she recovered, she couldn't go up the stairs without having to sit down and have a rest. Because it really worked out. And this is the thing, football's still going on, footballers are getting it, but something like this could destroy a footballer's career.
It could.
You know, and the value of that footballer as well moving forward. So
have you been keeping yourself busy though? You've not let the situation of being not sort of been restricted in what you can do get to you?
It has a little bit, if I'm completely honest, and I've definitely had wobbles with it. But
me too.
The new thing that I discovered that got me through, which suddenly seems to be everywhere, but I was doing it just before it exploded, was open water swimming.
Yeah,
and
I was going to ask you about that.
There's a place near me called Galvanize Dam, so it's about a half-hour drive away, and it's. I shouldn't say that now because if I still go anymore, but it's it's an old Victorian reservoir, and what they've done with it is that they've kept it open since about 2001. The local people look after it, so for swimming, and they've had that. It's up on the moors, so it's very exposed. It's fresh water, but because it's a sandstone, it was all built with sandstone. Over the years, that's eroded and deposited a lot of silt and sand, and that's kind of created a semi-natural beach. And so we go up there, or we were doing through lockdown. We'd go up there on a Sunday, and first thing on a Sunday morning, and just go in and swim. And it would be very cold because it was very exposed.
Yeah, freezing.
Yeah, well, even more so recently. So the last time I went in was on Christmas Eve, and it was 5 degrees. So the last time I went in, that's when I went in fully. We only did a few minutes. I went in more recently, and it was 1.5 degrees, the water. And I literally got as far as my waist. I went, nope, and came back out. But the really interesting thing about that is that it's very meditative. It really is. It really brings you into the present. You don't worry about anything else when that's going on, because you're just like, it's cold. And what the conditioning, I think, from having it already has been really good, because I kind of, the first time I went in, I kind of let out a squeal as soon as my foot went in the water, and now I walk in and I'm like, yep, that's cold, but that's it. And then I keep going, and then I go in, and I mean, obviously once I get down to 1.5 degrees, that's possibly my limit, but up to around 4 or 5 degrees, I'm fine, and I can go in and be there for hours. Are you finding my various pictures of me? Is this my Instagram now? Yeah, there we go. So yeah,
Stam
it does. On some days it does look like you're on a we did a joke about me being a Viking.
Well, good morning and welcome to Gadding's Dam for another Sunday morning swim.
Yeah,
and I've got full Viking today.
It looks like it could just be a beach somewhere.
Well, good morning and welcome to.
We don't use wetsuits or anything. We've just been going in skins, so let's swim in trunks and that's it. And
good beard
yeah,
there,
usually I'm in for about.
Like what you did with your beard.
Yeah, just as I've had lockdown beard and it's just kind of grown. I just experimented with plaiting. What? Yeah, it does freak people out.
Is that good Photoshop action there?
No, that's just that is literally, and I'll demonstrate for you now. It's called neck beard, and so all you do is.
This is going to be interesting.
Let's see this.
That's brilliant. That's going to be the thumbnail of this episode. That's going to be the thumbnail of this episode.
Yeah, so that is literally just there's no special effects in that. It's just the time angle. Interestingly, looking at my jacket there with the advert for Atmosphere, it's almost exactly the same as your curtains.
And
it's in the top right hand corner. Oh, that's me just wearing the bubble hat and about to go in. Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's true. That's funny. So, how did you get into that then?
So that is Atmosphere Radio. So the guy that runs it, I actually worked for him previously twice. So once on my first full-time radio job in North Wales back in 2005. Yeah, I was working for him up there, and then I worked for him in Southampton on a radio station down there in like 2014, 2015 as well. And this is it's a digital dance station. It's on DAB in Portsmouth, Brighton, and Glasgow. It's also online, atmosphere.radio, and there is the app. And yeah, I now do Thursday afternoons, and I'm also their gaming correspondent as well. Which is pretty good. I just saw you logging into Twitch. I had a very weird experience with Twitch the other day. So I was recording an episode of the Football Social Daily where I'm one of the pundits on, and I get a tweet while I'm recording it from a guy who's on a Twitch stream to tell me that I'm being talked about in this Twitch stream. And there's this former BBC presenter who got herself through lockdown by setting up a Twitch called We Claire is the name of it. And she's brilliant. And what she does is she just watches old episodes of TV shows and found something that I was on, and they were talking about that. And yeah, so I'm going on as a guest this month. You know, I know, it's brilliant. But there you go. You found my Podchaser. That was something else I did in lockdown. I updated my Podchaser account because I went into it and I went, "Oh, this is good." Yeah. I actually sat and chatted with Cole Raven, who's the guy who set it up, who's based in Hawaii last week, and it's a really cool platform that he's got there. Really it's like IMDb. It's growing all the time.
Podcasts, yeah. So if you search for a specific podcast, but you can also find the host of the podcast and anyone who's been on that podcast. So it's really useful if you're looking for someone.
And like Wikipedia, you can add to it as well, and you can add details because it's not. It's a kind of open source in that way. So when I went on and I had a look at myself, I was on about I think 5 different podcasts as guests that people had tagged me in. And I was like, well, I've done a few more than that. And it hasn't got them all on yet. But it's a little more up to the
I logged in the other day just because I got an email from them. Oh, yeah, Podchaser. It seems to now have suddenly got more popular because I've been on it now, and there's loads more like people that I know and podcasts that I recognise, and people have appeared on more things, and there's a lot more data on there, it seems. Yeah,
it's brilliant as well in terms of like as a CV as well, because people will, if you ever had that moment when somebody says, "So what do you do?" and you go blank. That it's perfect. So like, what shows have you worked on? I'm kind of like loads, and then well, what? I'm like, and now I can literally just send a link to this, and it has every different episode and capacity that I've done, and really all those things. So it's a nice. It kind of it scratches the ego a little bit because you look at it and you're like, yeah, I've done many things. I've done.
Well, you forget as well. You forget.
Yeah. And what's nice as well is things come back up and you work around and you can see where people have worked together on multiple projects. So we wrapped up on the left side last year, which was the big one we've been doing for 5 years.
Yeah.
Did a wonderful mammoth final episode, which I really enjoyed, with a little help from David Attenborough, and not really him. And but then on the back of that, so Football Social Daily is one that I do with Jim. He runs that show, and then we had a spin-off show from that, which we've just done over Christmas, New Year's, called Football Stories, which is 7-episode series, and that'll come back for another one. And that was basically based on the fact that when football stopped and everything went quiet, it was looking at the people that, you know, usually made up the crowd and where they were and what they were doing. So we spoke to the guy that creates the chants for Manchester United. We spoke to different people that have different stories about it, like former referees, and just very interesting stories that kind of get lost in the noise of general football. And then I've just launched a new podcast as well, which I've been advised on, called Voyage of the Page Turner, which
yeah, I saw that. I saw when I was looking at your profile. I saw that. Yeah. So what's the premise
based around
it?
those So it's basically a loose kind of interview show using the crux of a choose your own adventure book from the 80s. So those kinds of, like, you know, do you fight the dragon, turn to page 33, or do you try and run away, turn to page 37, that kind of thing. And so Colin, who does that show, I kind of consulted on it and a guest on it in a few weeks as well, in the episode called Prisoner of the Ant People. It only seemed appropriate. And so that show, Colin's a very talented comedian who I've actually worked with quite a lot. And again, this is one of the things I forget, but with something like Podchaser, you can see all the different projects that I've worked with him on. He was actually on my very first he was one of the main voices on my very first podcast. Then I set him and his comedy partner up in 2006 with their own podcast, and I was like, stick to this, it'll run and run. They did it for like 2 years. They went, nah, no one's into it. And, you know, it's one of those things they look back now and go, if we just kept going. Yeah. And then I'm just about to launch a new martial arts podcast. The first episode of that is going up today.
Just your own.
And
is it your own
I'm
thing?
also, yeah. So we did one previously, mixed martial arts, playing the words, Mick Tully. But through that, we started doing some work with a guy called Will Henshaw, who runs WOMA.tv, worldofmartialarts.tv. And he'd sort of launched a podcast, which was just audio versions of the videos he was doing on YouTube. And we've been working together on a few projects for a while, but we're launching this new podcast now, which is World of Martial Arts Podcast. And that's potentially going to join a sports network as well, which is exciting. And yeah, we've been batching some content for that. And it's a combination of things. So reviews of different martial arts movies, interviews with, you know, very talented martial artists, and then just commentary and stuff that's going on. But we're doing it in a way that's better produced using Will's TV influence than a lot of the general conversation stuff that's out there. And then I'm just, once I finish this, I'm finishing off an edit of to Ben and Max's guide. So Ben and Max are the two young kids I was mentioning earlier, and the little one is fascinated with drag queens, and so they've done some interviews with drag queens for their podcast. So I'm just cutting and pasting that and putting that together. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a wonderful. It's this wonderful like childhood innocence about it, and they like watching RuPaul's Drag Race. And so they've interviewed Danny Beard, who was on Britain's Got Talent a few years ago from Liverpool, and another drag queen. And it's just wonderful because it's that childlike thing of doing an interview, kind of going, okay, so I've got another question for you and another question for you, just going through the list of questions, but also just the pure innocence in the questions themselves and the conversation. And yeah, so that's going to be a really nice episode to have worked on as well.
Sounds cool. Oh, well, it's been great to catch up with you, man.
I know, it's been it's been a while. It's been a whole lockdown.
Yeah.
Then some.
We've had the odd Zoom call, but nothing podcasting wise.
I know. So what's what's the next plan for you? Are you kind of like, because you literally just set up the whole studio and everything before
signed a new
before
deal
all
with
this
the
happened.
local music trust. Fancy a new studio. Guests starting to come in. We've got 3 episodes in, and then boom, I had to close because of COVID. So I got to the point where I was missing having conversations with people. So I just thought, well, I'm going to have to resume my lockdown series. So I've got a few of those coming up, but I'm just counting down time until I can get back in the studio, really. That's all. Because it was just, everything about the show
it looked amazing from the pictures. Yeah,
no, it's really smart.
But then I think this is the thing that has taught a lot of people. Like, I always was like, well, I've got backups. You know, if things go wrong and like the rug's pulled under the world, and I sort of put a lot of my eggs into the football basket, and I was like, okay, football stops now. Right. And then live events, which I used to do, because I used to do a lot of stuff with Lancashire Cricket County Cricket Club. So that's gone as well. And then my backup plan was always, if I ever ran out of money, I would just go back and work in the travel industry, which I used to do years ago. And I'm still on the books with some people, just in good. But obviously that went. So I was like, So, yeah, I think this has been a real test in adaptability and pivoting, and yeah, we'll find a way.
I bet a lot of podcasts have been born out of this situation.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
some people
the statistics are crazy.
Or thinking about it, they go, right, well, I've got nothing else to do. I'm just going to do it.
So I think the statistics for April 2020 were 400,000 podcasts were submitted to Apple in that time.
Wow, that's got to be.
Bear in mind, like at the start of that year, there was only 1.3 million podcasts on Apple. So you're looking like that first lockdown, a third. You know, they made a third of all the podcasts that had ever been made were made in that time. Just
crazy.
You
just hope
so we're
some gems come out of that.
Yeah, but it also means as well that there's going to be a lot of good ones there that people just miss, and so that's a lesson that's well worth taking away from it. Just, you know, if people don't listen to your podcast, it doesn't mean that your podcast is bad. It just means that people haven't found it.
Yeah,
that's what I tell myself anyway.
And it's only growing.
Yeah, and it will take time. And also, but look on the bright side is that a lot of those shows that come along, they'll have given up after 7 episodes.
That's it.
So keep going.
There's a lot to be said for longevity, just sticking it out there. Do you think the average podcast now, the level of it, will be greater than what it used to be? Because I think my perception of like new podcasts, the average podcaster, not like celebrity, not professional, was quite low. But I think there's your average podcast now is getting better. Like, people are starting with better equipment. They're thinking about it a bit more, because obviously there's more resources out there about how to do a podcast. Yeah,
I think you could be onto something there. I don't think that's going to apply to everybody. I think certainly with the way that Anchor's developed, it's made it a lot easier and cheaper for people to get a podcast out there.
Yeah.
Which is agnostic in that, you know, as long as you're doing it, that they're not really making a judgment call on how good it is. And at the end of the day, that judgment call is very subjective as well. It's not always going to be objective on what's good and what's bad. I think that the basics, as you say, of like just equipment and awareness, obviously advances in technology, the basic microphones that you've got on your phone and your laptops, well, not your laptops, please don't use your laptop microphone, but your tablets and those kind of things. And the fact that it's become normal now for people to see microphones in conversation, so people will go and get a microphone. But then the thing is,
when I see people on TV all the time, regularly, who I'm just to these people, buy a microphone for God's sake.
Yeah, and then learn how to use it.
Go like this. It's like, buy a microphone.
Yeah, buy a microphone, learn how to use it as well. Like the different,
I'm talking about professional people who are like for the last year they've been doing this situation, yet they still haven't bought a microphone or a decent webcam.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is it's a, you know, professional is like, technically, like, are they professional just because we say they're professional, or because they got paid for it once? You know, there's different, there's different scales of that. So I think there's possibly as well, you're seeing a thing where because there are more podcasts that have come to the forefront and people are checking them out, and these podcasts are being produced better. That's giving something to emulate to. Whereas it used to be a podcast was the very first podcasts were two coders talking to each other.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty much what it was, using their laptop microphones or the headset microphones that they plugged in. So that's all that there was to aspire to. So people weren't, well, I say that, I mean, I was trying to do something different even back then, but if you're putting a higher standard out there, and those are the number one podcasts, those are what people come to first, and then that is what people will emulate or try and emulate or try and be like.
I think podcasting has been going long enough now where the general awareness of it is better than what it was.
It is, and it's growing, and I'm sort of just having conversations today with the organisers of Africa Podfest, which is in Nairobi in Kenya. I was possibly going to go there last year, but they had to cancel that because of COVID. Again, they're going virtual this year, but it shows you as well that it's growing massively, and the population of Africa is so huge, and so many of them have mobile phones now, which is the best way for listening. Data's getting cheaper, so there's more Wi-Fi hotspots, so people are having access to this, and also there's more representation because you've got so many different languages in there. Like up till now, like English has been the predominant language of podcasting, and very much we look at it from that point of view. But there's, especially in Spanish, is catching up in terms of the amount of podcasts that have been done in that language. South America is huge for podcasting. We're really seeing changes, and who knows where that's going to be. It's I think the world is a better place with more podcasts, and I think it's the most democratic medium that there is. But as we found out with democracy, just because you feel strongly about something and vote that way, it doesn't mean it will happen.
No. We've gained a bit of an audience from India with the introduction of the Ghana platform. Yeah, which I couldn't have predicted.
The thing is with that as well. Bear in mind that in India as well as a culture, but because of the history and a lot of the employment there, having the ability to speak good English is a very good skill in the employment market. And so it's entirely possible that you are just getting people that just want to hear something in English, and they've just found that and they're listening to it. It could be that, you have a huge fan base from the band back in the day.
Yeah, we're big in India.
Yeah.
I was confused though, because I was always under the impression that if your podcast was explicit and Marc's explicit, it wouldn't be heard in India, which mine is.
So that was there was the thing of, I think it was Egypt, India, one of the states in America, all those kinds of things. Yes, but then you also don't know how they're listening. They may be listening on a VPN. They may be listening through different ways. Yeah. I'm not sure. So I can't answer that question. I think there is, what I will say is, just based on that, and I've certainly done this before as well, there is a lot of facts and statistics bandied around in podcasting that people have just heard from elsewhere and don't know for a fact. So I'm kind of cautious about that now. Unless I've actually found out for myself or been there and met the person that did it, then I'm kind of like a lot more cautious. So
we're not going to be going anywhere for a while.
No.
But you seem to be making the most of the situation anyway. You've always got plates spinning.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing that happened last year though was stopping one of those plates spinning, which was when we put On the Left Side to Bed after 5 years, which is a really I didn't quite fully grasp how interesting that would be as an experience, because I spend so much of my time helping people launch podcasts. I've never closed one down properly. I've certainly been involved in the few projects where we just walked away from it and just not got back to it. But to actually put it to bed and go, this is it, this is the end, this is the last one, thanks very much, we're finished now, was I suppose it's like that relationship thing. It's like closure. You do get that whole
but you ended it properly, like
and what we did was we did something that we'd never done in all the episodes we'd done before, where we actually had myself and Jim have a conversation and a chat, because the format of that was always generally, Jim would host it, I would produce it, and we would write it together. He would take the lead on that, and then he would send his vocal over, and then I would add all the sound effects, the music, the clips, the sketches, the other voices into it. And so for the first time, we just sat and had a chat about things that we'd done, things that we remembered, and it was really fun. It's really fun. But it has been strange because it has meant that we don't consume so much of each other's life anymore. Yeah. It is like a breakup in that sense as well, because we although we worked together on other projects, we on that one particular, it was a fact that we would always have this day of the week, depending on which day the show was going out, would be dedicated to that, and then this would be when the script would come over, and then that would be when the updates were done on it, and then that would be when it was delivered. So yeah, it has taught me that, especially with that, how much of your life you can give to these projects and how much you get back when you take that step back.
Yeah, and then realizing when something's run its course or something's changed, which means you can't commit to it. So let's just end this now.
Yeah, and I think for us with that show is like we could have kept doing it, but if we're both completely honest, it wasn't making us money, and it had given us both exposure and raised our profile, and we'd been nominated for awards and all sorts of things, and both got work from doing the show.
So it certainly served its purpose.
Yeah, and it just got to the point where we're like, well, I think it's still, the format's still valid. I think it still works. I think there's still comedy value in it, even though it was technically topical. I think you can still go back to it and listen to it and still enjoy the show for what it is. And it was just really nice to do that send-off for it, because it meant I could call up all the people that had been involved over the years, different people that had done different voices at different stages, different contributors, and just have everybody in. And it was like having a party. So it was a nice send-off for that show.
Yeah, it was good. Oh well, thanks for joining us, mate. It's been great to catch up with you, as always.
Yeah,
let's not leave it a year and a half before we do another one.
Yeah, well, I mean, assuming that people enjoy it and download it, otherwise let's leave it a little bit longer.
Well, you've got to come to this new studio at some point when you're allowed.
I know. I saw the pictures at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'm coming up for that. And yeah,
done. As soon as we're allowed,
but,
your name's on the list.
Yeah, it will be. It's really exciting. There's a guy over in Shrewsbury as well that does the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast, Alex, and I think he's in the same situation, because he got to this nice thing, and it was beautiful setup right in the heart of the town, perfect for what he's doing with that podcast. And again, it's just that frustration of being unable to use it, having that facility and just not being there.
I'm not too bothered, because I know it'll come back around eventually.
Oh yeah, and you will love it when you're back in there. It's just going to be the best.
Appreciate it even more. Yeah. All right, cheers, Ant.
All right, Marc. Well, thanks very much for having me. And well, I hope to see you there very soon.
Yeah. All right. Nice one.